whole issue about what language is and the association, you know, of sound and symbol and all that, which is the basis of language. And language, more than anything else, probably is what sets us apart from everything else in nature. I mean, we are immersed in an ocean of language, an ocean of symbols, where symbols are linked to sounds. And, you know, I can sit here and utter meaningless sounds, essentially inherently meaningless sounds, but they make sense to you because they evoke meaningful mental pictures. And this is the thing, you know, and the brain architecture is set up to experience synesthesia. And synesthesia is one of these functions that, you know, the translation of one sensory modality into another. So you can, you know, hear colors and that sort of thing, or see sounds and that sort of thing. And that is also the basis of language when you think about it. And psychedelics are interesting in this respect because psychedelics are one of the few ways that you can reliably induce these synesthetic experiences. It's very common to have synesthesia. You know, on psychedelics, some people are genetically endowed with synesthesia, and they just experience that all the time. I have the strong intuition that children of below a certain age are probably spontaneously synesthetic all the time, because the brain structures that separate these different sensory modalities are not set in place yet. So it's very common for children to have synesthetic experiences, and that is a part of brain development and growing up and learning to speak and all that. If you look at genetically synesthetic people, about 1 in 100 persons is genetically synesthetic, meaning it happens spontaneously to them. If you look at those people, it is very common, it's usually the rule that it's very closely linked to their apprehension of words and numbers, right? And they will say, you know, the number 13 is, you know, smooth and hard and dark blue, you know. And for them, it's absolutely an apprehendable thing that it's like that. Or the letter, you know, A is, you know, purple polka dots. And they're not making this up. This is real for them. So it says something about the way that the centers in our brain that process meaning, process language, work, and how they tie into these sensory pathways. You know, if you think about the fact that psychedelics can evoke this synesthesia rather easily, I mean, you don't have to go very far before you can, you know, you can imagine a hungry primate, you know, a languageless primate out there foraging on mushrooms or whatever, accidentally or whatever, or deliberately, but first initially accidentally. They take them. Mushrooms are a good candidate because they don't require any processing. No MAO inhibitors required. You just reach down and eat them up. And it spontaneously elicits this thing, and it very easily triggers synesthesia. Well, and, you know, you can... And you can imagine, you know, the person finds this is why chanting and singing and all this has so much to do with shamanism, because it modulates the visions. So that person can, you know, start shouting and singing and chanting, and suddenly what's happening behind the eyes goes crazy, right? And then they pick up a stick and start beating a hollow log, and hey, that's even cooler, you know? They bring in rhythm. Well, so they've just invented language, music, musical instruments, all that's poetry, you know, all in one productive session.
And obviously,
and it makes you feel good. It induces ecstasy. So you only have to do it spontaneously or accidentally a couple of times, and then you get it, you know, and then you sort of say, well, hey, that was great. That made me feel good. So then you go back to repeat it. Who knows about the way to interpret these myths, you know? But in the forbidden fruit, it was the tree of knowledge, right? It wasn't, I mean, it was knowledge that was forbidden. It was you know, I mean, curiosity was not encouraged. And we were, you know, what was encouraged, or what we were more or less commanded to do in the context of this myth, was to remain not really human, you know, to remain like animals, innocent, and to not know about things like our own individuality and things like death, you know. And that was the thing, I think, you know. And at some point, I mean, the whole thing about Adam and Eve and the tree of knowledge is, of course, a myth, but it's really about at what point did we separate from, did we achieve self-reflection, right? This is what animals don't have. Well, by and large, I mean, there are evidence that maybe some of them do to some extent, but I think two things: the idea that, you know, you have an I sense, a sense of an I, and the sense of probably knowledge of, or the intuition of your own mortality. That's the loss of innocence, you know. I think that in the context of fundamentalist Christianity, thinking is not encouraged. You know, I mean, that's what they're trying to get away from. That's the whole thing. You know, you lost innocence. You know, you lost innocence because you asked too many questions and you thought too much, and you know, you questioned things, right? And this is what Christianity discourages, at least the fundamentalist type. Christianity is sort of foisting the notion on people that, you know, there are simple answers to complex questions. And I mean, I call it simple answers for simple people.